again. Good afternoon to all the students in the Methods and Approaches class in this particular group. Welcome to another Demo Friday. And as always, we say this is a video that is going to be featured on YouTube in our LSLP session webinar. And today, this video is part of a two-part event in our class, where we have had the chance to hear and learn about flipped learning. So in the morning, we had the pleasure of having Professor Marta Ramirez from Universidad de los Andes sharing some of her insights about flipped learning. And it's an interesting coincidence, serendipity, cosmic alignment, that even in the morning presentation, she cited the work of one Carolina Rodriguez Buitrago, who happens to be joining us today. So it is my pleasure to have two younger academics with brilliant work, who are doing brilliant work in a field that, as we kind of said in the morning, if you get to watch the first video, a field that has a lot of potential, but also has a lot of misunderstandings and has a lot of misconceptions about what it is. So with that introduction, I'm going to let Professor Carolina R. Buitrago do her thing. She's a professor at Institución Universitaria, Americana, ÚNICA, one of our institutions that has partnerships with our institution. And she is a recognized national and international expert in the area of flipped learning. So this is the one part where I am going to do the sensible thing. After the introduction, I'll just let Carolina walk us through what she wants to share with us this afternoon. So with that, Carolina, the floor is yours, and we'll look forward to learning from you this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Raul, for the invitation. And thank you, dear students, for being here today for this sort of talk, insight sharing opportunity. Well, as Raul pointed out, my name is Carolina Rodriguez Buitrago, and I am proud to work at Institución Universitaria, Colombo, Americana, ÚNICA. We do have alliances with UPB Bogotá. And it's really interesting that we are getting together. We get to join each other's efforts constantly. So this is a wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much, Raul, for the invitation. And I hope whatever I share with you today gives you some insights about flipped learning, not as a trend, not as a fashion, but actually as an approach that you could be using in your classrooms. I'm going to be asking some questions, so I would love for you to answer them in the chat if you could. Maybe if you don't want to open up the microphone for the recording, I would understand that, but please do have your conversations on the chat. I'll take a look at them a few moments during the session, right? So, well, as I was introduced, I am a full-time professor at Institución Universitaria Colombo Americana, ÚNICA. I was recently also invited to be a part of the board of the Flipped Learning Network. And now, well, I have to say that two of my biggest jobs are being a wife and a mom, and a 7-year flipper and lifelong learner. So, well, today I'm going to share with you, yes, some conceptual information, but also some of the findings and the insights that I have gained through the years, and especially through that very difficult 2020. So it's kind of a before and after COVID-19. That's kind of the perspective that I'm going to give to this talk. So the idea will be to kind of frame it around flipped learning during COVID-19 and for later, because this is something that definitely has gained a lot of attention due to the modality change that a lot of institutions have to undergo during 2020. But flipped learning was a lot before around us, and it's going to stay for a while. So the idea is to clarify some things and hopefully give you some thoughts that can help you once you go into your teaching profession, or when you're starting to organize, your thesis project and maybe think about what you're going to be doing with your life in the subsequent 5 semesters of your career, of your major. So let's start with a question. I would love for you to answer on the chat if possible. If anyone wants to open up the microphone, go for it. What do you understand by flipped learning? I'm going to give you some time there.
I haven't heard about that.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, that's all right. If you haven't heard about it, then this visit is relevant. Okay, so shall I just go ahead and ask a couple people?
Um, I want to say something.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you. Thank you,
Maybe
Stephen.
it's a way to learn, but like in a indirect way. Like you're trying to for example, as a teacher, you're trying to, of course, teach something, but not like make it so obvious. Like today, we're going to study the to be verb. No, you start like with another thing, like with an activity or something different
Mhm.
that doesn't look like a class, like a real class. Not a real class, like a bored class. So
Okay, okay.
maybe that's like I didn't like I understood by flip learning.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, there's a lot of good information in that intervention. Thank you so much. Anyone else would like to jump in and say something about it? What do you understand by flip learning? Just flipped, what would that be? You know, when you think about a flip, what do you think about? So maybe one more person or on the chat, it's fine. Okay, shall we?
I think that it is like
Listen again.
learning actively. I mean, not always the teacher in front of the class and giving a talk. No, active.
Okay.
I think flipped. Yeah, like actively learning.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you so much. But is it easy? No, it isn't. Because as you have seen, like it's really hard to get students to participate because they have been used to a certain methodology for the 12 years or whatever of their schooling. And so to break that paradigm really takes some effort. So we're going to walk through what flip learning was understood as before COVID-19. So this is the official definition of flipped learning by the Flipped Learning Network. It was proposed in 2014, and it says, and I want you all to read with me, read along with me. Flipped learning is a pedagogical approach in which direct instruction moves from the group learning space, this one, to the individual learning space, each one of yours. And the resulting group space is transformed in a dynamic, interactive learning environment where the educator guides students as they apply concepts and engage creatively in the subject matter. I want you to think about an English class. Yeah, how would this look in an English class? Direct instruction, the teacher explaining the passive voice, moves to the individual learning space of the student. With what? With a video, with a handout, with a sketch note, with a podcast, right? So the teacher can explain in many other ways. And then the resulting group space is transformed into a dynamic interactive learning environment where the students are practicing that infamous passive voice, right? Um, through creatively and engaging in the subject matter. So they can be creating conversations, writing pieces, doing writing workshops in the class. I mean, you name it. So think about this definition with any class you might be able to teach. You can do it in social studies, you can do it with science, with methods and approaches, anything, right? So then in 2018, the Flipped Learning Global Initiative, this is another organization, created a new definition, but this was not as the one from the Flipped Learning Network. The one from the Flipped Learning Network was, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to show you that yet. This one was created by a group of people, say 7 or 8 people, including John Bergman and Aaron Sams, who were kind of the pioneers of the term. But this one was created by a group of 100 delegates from all around the world, included. And so the idea was they created something, and then teachers from all around the world, using the flipped learning approach, we contributed to the definition. So this definition is flipped learning is a framework that enables educators to reach every student, right? How do I reach Stephen? How do I reach Luis Miguel if they don't have their camera open? How do I see that they're actually there, paying attention to the class, learning, focusing? It's really hard to reach every student, especially in this context, right? The flipped approach, oh my God, what happened? Sorry. The flipped approach inverts the traditional classroom model by introducing course concepts before class. So I would have given you a video of this talk, and then you would have had a lot of homework about it. And then in class, we would have done something different, right? If we had flipped this webinar. Allowing educators to use class time to guide each student. How many times have you wanted, or, well, you will know this, you want to use task-based learning, project-based learning, gamification, all these great things, but you never have time to do it. When you flip, you're gonna have time to. Through active, practical, innovative applications of the course principles. So once again, we have the word active. Thank you, Luis Miguel, for that. Yes, it is active, practical, and innovative. So we can do this with any subject, right? Research, writing, speaking, English, science, you name it. Then in 2020, I ventured to create my own definition of flipped learning, which is combined with my other passion, that is positive education. And it is flipped learning is a compassionate teaching methodology. Compassionate, not in the Spanish sense of compasión, like lástima, not that, but compassion understood as the caring for the other, right? Caring for teachers, caring for students, caring for families. Students are placed at the center of the learning process. I think that's a way to care about the students. And teachers are architects of authentic, meaningful, and intentional learning experiences for both spaces of learning, in and out of the classroom. We have many different situations and contexts in Colombia. We cannot generalize or apply principles as they come to us. We have to really try to situate them to our context, and that's, we are architects. We construct, we organize, we design, right? What we need for our learners. Okay, so far, what would you say is your favorite definition? The Flipped Learning Network, the Flipped Learning Global, or mine? No, I'm just kidding. I don't want you to decide and just say, hey, yeah, yours is awesome. No, it's fine. I just want you to construct your own. What do you think flipped learning is in your own context? You know, this is something you will be able to construct with practice. Okay, so, oh, there we go. We have something on the chat. This is great. Yeah, we got to support. Yeah, definitely. Okay, oh, sorry about that notification. So we're going to take a look at some best practices of flipped learning. As Raul pointed out, this is something, a little bit of a buzzword. And so everyone is saying, oh, yes, I flip because of whatever reason. And that's not so easy, right? It's not so easy to say that. So we need to have in mind a few things. Best practices are determined first by the 4 pillars of flipped learning. These 4 pillars are flexible environment, learning culture, intentional content, and professional educator. I'm really going to give them to you very briefly. The flexible environment is not only the physical space, it's about the mindset. It's about the mentality that you have as a teacher, being flexible with activities, being flexible with student paces, being flexible with students' learning preferences, being flexible in many different ways, right? With curriculum, with assessment, etc. Learning culture. You need to build a culture where it's okay to make mistakes, where it is okay to be part of it, where you don't have to have it right to be able to raise your hand and say something, where mistakes are not punished but encouraged. That is going to be a learning culture. Then we have intentional content. How many topics did we study back in school that are useless today? You know, how many things do you think about that you were like, why did I ever take a look at that? You know, why did I ever learn about mitochondria when I have no idea what they are? I cannot, you know, say anything about them. So content needs to be intentional. If we're going to teach something to students, they better use it in life. You know, this, we have to make decisions, we have to make the calls. And then professional educators, well, is basically researchers, you know, observers, people who are constantly learning from experience, learning from feedback from students, who are not afraid of asking students, hey, do you like the class? No, teacher, I don't. Okay, what can I do to change it? Right? That's a professional educator according to the Flip Learning Network. Then we have the standards. They are called the GIFL, they're calling them now, the Global Standards for Flipped Learning. And there are 1,000 things that we should consider, not 1,000. Actually, there are 187 elements, right? So that's why when people say, oh yeah, I flipped my class because I gave videos to my students, I'm like, maybe not, because you haven't considered the other 186 things, right? So what are those things? These people, very smart, because you know John Bergman was a chemistry teacher, so they created this table, like the periodic table kind of thing for flipped learning. And so each one of these lines or groups of elements, they have a color code. You know, so for example, the yellow ones, these ones on the green side, they are communication and culture. We have professional development. We have individual space mastery. We have group space mastery. Remember, we're talking about the spaces, K-12 focus, etc., etc. So if you go to their website, which is on my slides, and I can share them, Raul, if you need me to, or I can share the links. You can go and you can click on each one of them, and you're gonna find a video of John Bergman explaining each one of them. Like, what is a flexible space? What is designed for active learning? You know, like each one of them has an explanation. So yeah, we need to be aware when we hear this. I flipped my class because I send YouTube videos to my students to watch at home. We've been flipping for 10 years. I've heard this. We don't do that, because the thing is that sending readings to students to do at home and then discussing them in class, that's just, you know, basic university teaching. That's no rocket science. It doesn't involve any specific lesson planning. It doesn't involve any specific work on the group learning space. Is basically just the teacher expecting the student to understand and to know how to read a text, and then the students, the professor, once again, expecting the students to say intelligent things when they come to class, right? However, in a flipped environment, you structure all that experience. So all of that happens naturally because the experience has been structured. The same happens in a school. If you want to teach something, you structure all the experience, the outside of the classroom and the in-class experience, for your students to be successful. So, how I flipped before COVID-19, yeah? I have my individual space and my group space, right? Remember, individual space is what before used to be called homework, which is a horrible word because it doesn't really relate to what happens in the classroom. It's just, you know, busy time, busy work at home. And then the group space is what happens when we're together. So before in my class, oh, this is wonderful. We did, you know, for example, that you see on the picture on the left, that was a, my God, I forgot the name. Gee, it escaped me. Oh my God, Sugata Mitra, he proposed the hole in the wall. That was, oh, okay, it'll come back to me. It's a type of activity where students do basically everything. It's awesome. Then we did, for example, cycling tours. As you can see, we were, this was my English class. We went on a cycling tour in downtown Bogota, and we would name buildings and talk about things in English. That was a class. We did presentations. My students did gallery walks and, you know, constant presentations that they prepared within the classroom. This is, for example, sketchnoting. We try to do that too. We went to marches, like these are marches, you know, for students, for education. We actually went there. So as I can show you, when I flip my class, I can do not only academic stuff, I can help my students live, you know. So then we have, for example, this type of activity that I love, that is kind of a word wall. Now with Padlet, we do this online, but when we don't have technology, we'll have to be creative, right? Students would do in-class flips. They would study in stations. As you can see, there are different groups here, students doing different things, yeah? Students would be making posters, making things. manipulating language, manipulating work, you know, not just listening to me as you are right now. Sorry. Hyperdocs, that's another of my things. Like I design lessons, grammar lessons through the hyperdoc structure. That would be an entirely different webinar. Oh my God, we went into it. Sorry. No, we don't want to go into it. And I have a testimonial. So let's see if I, well, wait a second. I have to make sure that I'm sharing my sound. Can you give me a Zoom reaction if you hear like one of the thumbs up, hearts, whatever there on the Zoom?
Well, hello there, everybody. My name is Luis Hernandez. I'm currently on my 7th semester here at ÚNICA, and today I would love to talk about in-class flip learning. So the day we did this was with Prof. Carolina. We all had different rotation stations where we had different tasks, and we were paired up with a classmate. What I loved about this was that we were able to tackle each station with our classmates, and we had an interaction with each other. We had an interaction with the task. And so what I enjoyed about this was that it was student-centered, where the students get to talk, get to say what they think about certain things, but also get to learn, and we get to measure and gradually learn more as we go through each station. And then afterwards, we get to share with each one, especially the teacher, and then we also get to just enjoy the value of actually doing our own work, which really pays off as a student. To feel that you did something, that you finished a task, feels amazing. And so in-class flip learning is student-centered, and in my personal experience, it has allowed me to just know my role as a student. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, I'm happy to tell you that Andrew is already a teacher. That was a video that I recorded some semesters ago, and he's already a teacher and he's using this, you know, so it actually works. You use it as a student, you participate in an in-class flip or in flip learning as a student, and you can extrapolate it to your students once you are in the classroom, right? So that's what it looks like for now. So before COVID-19, I would like to hear or read anything on the chat, impressions, any questions up to this point. We have just seen the definitions, we have seen the pillars, and we have seen the elements. Anything that calls your attention that, you know, is a main takeaway from this part up to now? Should I ask a specific name?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Stephen.
This question is based in like my own experience because this semester I start the practice, and with these definitions and what you did with your classes before the COVID, I saw things like very spontaneous, like the cycling and all of that. But so my question goes to, what do you do to flip your the learning in your classes virtually? Because for me that is so hard, because I can find like something interesting or something that called the attention the whole class, because maybe I found a activity, but the activity just worked like 10 minutes. After the
Yes.
10 minutes, my students are going to be like distracted or bored, or I have to do another thing to like catch their attention, and it's very difficult. And sometimes I can catch the attention, but just one class. So what I'm going to do the other classes, but not repeating what I did in the classes, because of course we know that if I repeat in every class, every activity is going to turn very boring. So, like, what is your, I don't know, like your advice?
I'm so glad, Stephen, that you asked that question, because I'm going to talk about that in a moment, about a specific model that is called SOFLA. So stay tuned. Don't get distracted. Okay. All right. So yes, during COVID-19, we are all like this just because of what Stephen described. Yeah, students are hard to keep in line. We don't know who is there and who isn't, because the cameras are most of the time turned off. we don't know how to really visualize what's happening. We have a lot of work planning and grading and all that. So yes, we as teachers, it's a really hard time for us. However, we need to recognize, and I will cite quote your professor here, that we are living a time that is an emergency remote teaching. And well, actually that was 2020 first semester. Then we started moving to online learning because this kind of took off, like stayed a lot of time with us. And so how does it all 2020? It's a great article that you might want to take a look at in order to clarify the differences between emergency remote teaching versus online learning. What is expected from us and what is not, because good online learning takes planning, and it's not planning that happens overnight as it happened for a lot of institutions with the response to COVID. We're still learning, we're still making changes, we're still making modifications, but it is important to know the basics of online learning in order to make these decisions, right? There is a really good webinar by your professor on YouTube. He did it for ASOCOPY, and I actually cite you constantly on this. This is actually part of the slides regularly. So you can take a look at that webinar if you really want to understand the differences between the concepts that are around right now. Distance learning, virtual education, online learning, you name it. So I encourage you to go there and watch that if you haven't, because there are a lot of interesting ideas and also a model. So what I did personally was, my individual space changed and my group space changed. Both of them were in the student's home, right? Both of them were now back behind the computer. And so in the individual learning space, and here, Stephen, I hope you can take a lot of notes, you can go and do hyperdocs. You can do pre-recorded videos made by the teacher using PowerPoint and screencasting sites. You can do textbook pages. You can do annotated or enhanced readings on paper or PDF. You can use websites like Perusal, Actively Learn, etc. Podcasts, slideshows, teaching texts, or tutorials. All of these are things that I have used with my students. Yeah. And I can show you a couple samples if you want, but let's keep going and you tell me if you want to see them later. Then in the group learning space, what do we want to do? We want to do student-centeredness, right? Whatever it is that keeps students at the center of the process. So authentic interaction, yeah? Breakout rooms, speaking activities, in-class flip, yeah? Socratic seminars, peer instruction, feedback, very important, inquiry-based learning, cooperative learning, differentiated instruction, gamification, mastery learning, project-based learning, and whatever you can think of. Yeah, that too. Okay, so once you flip, you never go back, and you flip no matter what. My little Dr. Seuss kind of pun. Okay, so remember that we need to keep in mind the pillars, right? We need to have a flexible mind. The flexible pillar is the only one that I'm going to go in detail right now, because this is an important keyword now. We have to be flexible. We need to establish spaces and timeframes that permit students to interact and reflect on their learning as needed. We need to understand that not all students have the same level of connectivity. Not all students have the same access to resources. Not all students have the same beautiful, quiet space that is required for learning to happen. Some students live with 8 people in their house and are dealing with the constant noise and interruptions from children, etc., day by day. So we need to be flexible, and we need to establish different spaces and time frames so that every student can finish their task, can do their assignment, can do the exercise. If we give them a time, for example, at the end of the class, we might be generating extra stress for those people who don't have the appropriate resources. The second indicator of this pillar is I continually monitor and observe my students to make adjustments as appropriate. Nothing is written on stone. If you flip your class, you cannot say, oh yeah, but this is the way that it's done, period. No, you have to be flexible, you have to be open-minded, and be open to feedback. Realize that students are the ones who are receiving what you're giving, so they are the ones who know whether it is good or not. And three, indicator three is I provide students with different ways to learn content and demonstrate mastery. So for example, you can use something called choice boards where you create different alternatives, different activities for your students. I can show you examples of all of this if you want, because the idea is that not all students learn the same way. And as I mentioned to you, not all of them have the same level of access. So we cannot ask everybody to make a video because not everybody will have a camera, or not everybody will have, a parent with a phone that is going to let them just record a video. So we need to give them different alternatives, different opportunities to demonstrate mastery and to learn that content. So during this time of COVID, one thing I had to do was to adapt my schedule. I had to be very careful about the balance between synchronous and asynchronous time. Yeah, because students are feeling overwhelmed with all the synchronous classes that we're having, that at least in my university. Okay, so Luis Miguel, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, so when you plan a class, for example, what you said with videos, so if some students cannot record a video, so they do other different activity or what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Okay.
I try, for example, I have a couple of students that are, we live in Bogota, and a couple of them are living in their house in Carepa. And so their internet access is not as good. It's not really good. And so what I do is, for example, if to my group of students, I ask them to do a mind map and to record it on Screencast-O-Matic to these students. What I will ask him is draw the mind map on a piece of paper and record it with your phone, because they have a phone. They have WhatsApp and they own it because they're adults, university students, right? So they can do that. And I'm making a flexible choice. Yes, I will get one video on WhatsApp, but that student is going to feel like, okay, pressure is off. I don't have to go out of my way to find an internet cafe or whatever. I can just do my task here with paper and pen and with my phone, which is what I have right now. So for that, you need to have a diagnosis. You need to know your students' conditions. You need to care about that. And so to begin the class, suggestion, always start with the diagnosis about technology access. What do you have? Do you have a computer? Do you have a phone? Do you have a tablet? Where do you take your classes? Do you have internet connection at home? Do you share the network? How many hours a day are you getting connected? All these things, these little things you ask them before you start. So you make yourself a big picture of what the students' conditions are before you begin the class, so that you know the kind of activities you can design and the ones that you shouldn't design because of the access to some tools. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So moving on from adapting my schedule, yes. So I had to make a decision which classes were going to be synchronous, which classes were going to be asynchronous, and what would I do in the asynchronous classes? Like students would just be reading. Would they be disconnected or connected from the internet? All these decisions were made because of COVID. Okay, so I think that's all the classes. Second, I had to adapt my activities. Of course, synchronous versus asynchronous time. The thing is that in the institution where I work, we don't have internet. We don't have internet access for students. They don't have Wi-Fi. They cannot use the devices. So we are basically with the internet the teacher can provide from the computer the teacher has hooked on the wall. And maybe if I wanted to adapt my activities, because now my students have technology, so I had to change things. Okay, so I did hyperdocs and choice boards and videos and quizzes and Mentimeter and collaborative projects, like make all the necessary changes so that my students would feel, the class is giving them what they need. Let's see one of these. Yeah, so for example, as you can see here, can you see my screen still? Are you seeing the presentation or a movie workshop task feedback?
The movie workshop task.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, I recorded a video just, giving them the feedback about a task that they did. I'm not going to have you listen twice to my voice. So like move this. So
Hello,
this is my
teaching
face.
middle
You see, so I'm
education
here,
guys.
I'm
How
there
are you
with them, joining them through a video. this is taking forever to move. Okay, so, you know, bring kind of all the, because this was for a methods class, actually was didactics. And so I brought, you know, the ministry's document. I explained to them what I was, you know, expecting from them to do, all this. Yeah, this is the kind of information I would normally include. I would show different different resources, show the Google Classroom, yeah, kind of like help students see through my eyes what I expect them to see. Sorry. Okay. 3, I had to build strong relationships with my students. As you may imagine, we need to know more about them. Who is having a difficult family condition? Who is living with their father who has been, you know, attacking or assaulting their mother? There are many things going on. And so if you don't have a strong relationship with students, how are you going to know what's happening in their life? Yeah, we are more than just academics. So yeah, have to use all the tools at my disposal, Teams, Google Classroom, Edmodo, WhatsApp, connect, make connections with them, try to find answers to the questions. Okay, give me 1 second. I have to open my window. So I think my cat left. Have escapist. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. All right, so I had to plan my class sessions more carefully. As Stephen pointed out, we have to plan, and we have to plan by the minute, because students get bored easily in the online environment. They get distracted. It's really, really difficult to keep them hooked and connected. I guess you guys are hooked and connected, maybe not, you know, maybe even watching something. So it's really hard, and we have to make plans, planning sessions more carefully. So you have to include games, you have to include activities, you have to include different kinds of exercises like what I showed you on that slide, hyperdocs, tutorials, collaborative exercises, etc. I definitely had to improve my feedback practices. Yeah, feedback is always a difficult aspect. But now it's more necessary. Like now I have to be closer to my students. I have to know exactly where they are in their process. And I think it's easier because of all of the technologies available, right? And I had to integrate SOFLA. This is what Stephen was asking for. So SOFLA is the synchronous online flipped learning approach that I helped build. I just contributed a little bit to that model to my friend Helen Marshall in New York. And this is the model. The model is pre-work. The yellow step is done at home. So students either watch a video, do a reading, create a sketch note, listen to a podcast, you name it, whatever they need to prepare for that topic. Then while in the synchronous session, you do the remaining 7 steps. You do sign-in activity. You do a whole group application, you do breakouts. Breakout rooms are a necessary part of this model. Then you do a share out. Students come back from the breakouts and they share. You do a preview and discovery. You do assignment instructions and reflection. This is a whole new webinar. If you wanted to, I mean, definitely there's a lot to learn about this model. And I can provide this reference. Actually, it is in the document that I'll talk about later. So that was flipped learning while, you know, like while learning, kind of learning in the middle. Now, what I think or I foresee should happen after, yeah, well, definitely COVID just pushed us to use the internet, pushed us to use all these great tools, and pushed us to flip our class, whether we liked it or not. Depending on the resources that we had at schools, we made decisions, we designed things in a different way, but it was all because we were pushed. Now we cannot waste all that learning. You know, we cannot waste, for example, you guys as students, you cannot waste all the learning you did. Probably you didn't see your friends for a year, probably you are feeling down, but you learned, yes? Luis Miguel? Probably you learned a lot from web tools. You learned a lot about the internet. You learned a lot about self-regulation and yourself as a learner. You learned about discipline. So don't waste all that learning, right? Remember my definition, right? So flipped learning is a compassionate teaching methodology. If you are one of those teachers who wants to screw students over, this is not for you. If you're one of the teachers who enjoys seeing students cry, this is not for you, because this is gonna take a lot of your time and energy for making lessons that are useful to your learners, yeah, that are real and that place them in the center of the learning process. I would like to share a couple of words from some experts on the flipped learning arena. So one of them is from Helene Marshall. This is the creator of SOFLA. And she said back in 2018, flipped learning is not the flavor of the month. It is here to stay. She was one of the people who crafted the definition of flipped learning and who created the pillars of flipped learning. So she kind of foresaw that back in 2014, and we're still going hard and strong with flipped learning. Then John Berkman, one of the pioneers, he said, flipped learning is a meta strategy that allows all other strategies to work. I love this idea. I love this idea because he presents it as flipped learning as the operating system. And then you can install all the apps that you want. So gamification is an app, project-based learning is an app, CLIL is an app, whatever you want is an app. But if you have this operating system, everything is gonna work because you're not the center of the class. You are helping the students learn on their own. You are helping them develop self-regulation and autonomy. So everything is going to work. Aaron Sams, the other pioneer of this flipped classroom movement, said, if we design for the fringe, we will include everybody. So this is the thing, when we are designing for a class, regularly, classroom design or lesson planning is about the people, the average, what the average can do. And so the high achievers and the low achievers are left out. Yeah. And so what Aaron proposes is let's design for those outside, for the high achievers and the low achievers, and everybody will be included. Yeah. This is a connection to your to your lesson planning unit. Then Martha said, flipped learning is all about the mindset. You need a growth mindset to flip your class. What does that mean? If you think you know it all, you'll never flip your class. You need to grow. You need to know that from feedback, you're going to learn a lot. I have learned a lot from the feedback of my students, what they have told me, what they have informed me. Every single class, I ask them how they felt, how it went. And this has helped me create really interesting and meaningful courses for my students. So some suggestions for you: make a mindset shift. It is important for you to change your mind from the traditional teaching paradigm to the active learning paradigm. Yeah, like we know students like to do things, let's do things. Yeah, this is a webinar, so it's different. But when you have a class, you have them doing everything. Bear in mind the pillars of flip. Remember that you need to have a flexible environment, a learning culture, intentional content, and be a professional educator. Learn from and with your students. Yeah, we are all the time learning from our students. The day we think we know it all, that day we stopped learning. So just ask them, ask them. They'll give you really valuable information. Oh, but my students are 6-year-olds. They'll tell you very valuable information. Trust me. Put pedagogy on the driver's seat and technology on the passenger seat. Yeah, let's not make that mistake of putting technology on the driver's seat, because then everything goes to waste. Technology is just a tool. It's like the board, it's like the marker. What really makes our class be amazing, it's the pedagogy behind it. So make your decisions based on that. Important learning lesson here: take care of yourself, or so you can take care of others. Yeah, it's important that you don't feel overwhelmed, that you don't feel negative about what you're doing. Otherwise, your students are going to pick up on that and are going to realize that you're suffering through teaching them. So it's important for you to take care of yourself, to sleep well, to eat well. This goes also for you as a student, because sometimes you're like, oh yeah, no, I know, I never have time. Yes, you have time. We all have the same 24 hours. We just have to organize them as we want them to have the day that we want. And strengthen your tribe. Yeah, Raul will tell you about that. He has a very strong tribe. We're all there to support each other, to help each other, and that is what matters. As educators, we are not in silos. We shouldn't be in silos. We are a community that is all going towards the same goal, having students who enjoy learning, who love learning, and who can contribute to our society to make it a better place. So vamos que vamos, we're all in this together. I have definitely, there is a giveaway for you. So I have a lesson plan format for flipping and a further reading list that I'm going to give you just in a second on the chat. And I'll give, I hope that Raul, you can capture it so that you can put it on the description of the YouTube video. So anyone who came can, have those two tools right there. And so, well, happy flipping. You can follow me on CR Buitrago on Twitter or at my blog at crbuitrago.com. That's all I had to share with you today.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Carolina. I really appreciate the overall session. And before we open the room for questions from the students, there are some things as I heard your presentation that become salient, and one of them it's this understanding. It's important if students get this understanding that flipped learning, that they cannot reduce flipped learning to the videos or the platforms. And I think when you brought the example of going to the park or going to the march, and as an example of flipping the class, it's understanding that it's kind of like, and I'm going to bring an example from my background in literacy, and it's the whole discussion of multimodality and how multimodality has become, let's make videos. And like, no, multimodality precedes making videos. Multimodality, I always tell, multimodality has been around for 50,000 years. So flipping the class, I mean, if you can, we can even argue, we can even make a philosophical, historical argument that we can have flipped learning since the Greeks. The Greeks, when they started, the concept of the agora, and taking, the concept of the agora as the public square, where the philosophers would talk. When you bring the class to the square, when you bring the class to the park, so you can say flipped learning has been around for millennia. It's just that when we narrow it down to make videos and put them on a platform, as I kind of mentioned in the morning too, it's not just the platform, it's not just Google, it's not just Brightspace, it's not just Canvas, it's not just Google Classroom, it's not Google Drive. That there is more to flipped learning than the technological side of flipped learning.
Absolutely. Yes, and definitely something important there is the role. I will go back to your example on the Greeks, and it is, we cannot say that will be flipping because there is an expert standing in the middle telling everyone how to do things. And that's what flipped learning is not.
Yeah.
Flipped learning takes on the learning of the students, the contributions of the students, the construction of knowledge. Finally, Vygotsky would be happy to see constructivism happening. Students actually constructing their learning. But for that to happen, we as professors, we as teachers, we have to trust that students can. And students need to trust themselves that they can. The thing is that our paradigm in education for so long has been the expert feeding, the expertise on the non-expert, that people have a very passive attitude towards learning. And it is called, actually, there is another term, and I don't know why I'm so bad at terms today. I'm just losing everything, but it's, oh my God, defenselessness. Yes, this learned defenselessness. That's what Martin Seligman calls it. It's like, we believe we cannot do anything because anyway, my teacher is not going to let me, so I just don't. I just wait for the teacher to give me everything,
Yeah.
So it's a really difficult paradigm to break because of bad habits that we have had for years.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah, if you want to flip, that's why it takes a change of mindset, because it's going to be, you're going to face resistance. You're going to face a lot of resistance from students, from parents, from the administration, from your superiors, from everyone. So you have to be brave because you're going to face a lot of resistance.
All right, let's see if some of the students have any further questions. I mean, we still got a bit of reasonable amount of time, so Again, you can open the microphones or you can just type the question in the chat. We're monitoring both right now. So if any of you have any questions or any comments, anything you want to add, as we now are engaged in conversation, please go ahead. Monitoring.
No hands up.
Any questions, any comments, fellas?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if I understood it.
Am I hearing someone?
Yeah, Angela is talking. Angela, can you speak a little louder?
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I can hear you, Angela.
Maybe I can put the question in the chat. I don't know.
No, no, you can talk. Go
I
ahead.
hear
Go
you
ahead.
now.
We
Yeah,
can
I
hear you,
now.
Angela.
Okay. I don't know if I understood like the framework really well, but like flipped learning, it is. I mean, I understood that the students construct their knowledge by themselves, but I mean, like the methodology, like you bring to them a topic before class and they search about that, and then in class you do activities or this. I don't like understood that really well.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question, Angela, because that's a big misunderstanding. So it's like, oh yeah, so then we're not going to pay the teachers anymore because they're not going to teach, right? That's what the schools think. Oh, let's flip, because that way we don't have to pay the teachers. The students are going to teach by themselves. And that's not true. That's not what happens. What happens is we invert. We invert the places and the spaces, right? So I'm going to share my screen to show something else. And it is right now I am teaching a methods course, and I'm teaching academic writing, right? So here, this is a preparation that I'm doing for a video that I'm going to record. So as you can see on my screen, it's a set of slides, you know, it's a slide deck. What I would teach in the regular class, like if I were a regular teacher, I would just teach this in the class, right? Give my students this lecture about how to write the literature review, right? But what I do is I record this on a video that, yes, I host on a platform. Yeah, that is actually Google Classroom in my case. Yeah, I don't think I have it open right now. That's not it, sorry. I want to show you kind of the process. Yeah. So, okay, I have to go to the classroom. Sorry, I'm moving this a lot and you're all seeing my folders. So this is the class, the academic, the research project class, right? And so here we are on the literature review unit, right? Oh, gee, sorry. So if my students go here, they're gonna get all the materials, but the materials are not, you know, like they are made by me. So I have my videos. And as you can see, hello, my dear Research 2 students, and welcome to our video on Literature Review Matrix. So I do my lecture, make sure the article, yeah, I want you to use those. The difference is that my lecture doesn't take 1 hour, it takes 12 minutes, and it's watched by my students before, right? They don't arrive to class and I explain this to them, they watched it before class, right? And then when we come to class, because what they are going to do is to complete a matrix with their literature, with the literature for the literature review. So what we do in the class is that they have the literature review matrix template. They download that template, right? And they start working there on that with me to answer the questions. So it's not the other way around. It's not like I teach the class and then they go home and they try to do the thing and have all the questions by themselves, but they watch the class, then they come here and they do the exercise with me to answer the questions to them. You know, like this would be kind of the basic, like 101 way to do it. Yeah. But there are many more things involved. Yeah. So Angela, does that answer your question?
Angela?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that.
Amazing. Are there any other questions? I mean, again, remember, you have the option of putting in the chat or just opening your microphones, whichever way you want. We heard you. Yeah,
Yeah, we heard you.
we heard you, Angela. While the other students think, um, if this were the first time I was considering flipping my class, I mean, what would be what kind of like, keeping it very simple, what would be two things you should definitely do and two things that, oh, please don't even try this?
Okay. Wow, that's good. So, two things you should definitely do: have the diagnosis to know about your students' resources, learning styles, needs, etc. Definitely. And do read a lot about this. Read about other implementations of flipped learning. Try to find who did it and how they did it and what worked and what didn't, because that helps. That informs your practice. You know what other people have done and how they have done it and how successful or not they have been. It has really helped. And don't just send videos on YouTube like random. No, you need to prepare a lesson. Like, you need to have the structure of a lesson. Is not just watch this video and then see what can happen in the class. No, you need to connect clearly what students are going to do at home and in the class. Yeah, that's very important for it to be flipped learning. Otherwise, it's just homework. And what else? What other thing not to do? Yeah, don't flip everything. Like, don't flip all of your classes and every class and every topic. No, you go crazy. Yeah, just little by little, start step by step.
Yeah, I think that's a good consideration, especially even if you're gonna flip your class, you should. I mean, I agree. We should not everything should be flipped.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Not every element of the class is flippable if we're gonna go with the language. And I think that's for a lot of people. I see a lot of people failing at flipping. Well, I think first of all, I mean, this is my view again as a more casual, I mean, a more casual participant of the game.
Mhm.
That I think a lot of people use the word, they use the name as a placeholder just to kind of give themselves a little bit of credit or kind of give the class a little bit of street cred.
Yeah.
So I guess you have seen that happen often. That they just go, it's flipped learning, and then you're like, okay, that's it. And I personally think that it's better to do the flipping and flipping the class without calling it as such than claim you're doing it and then you start seeing we can start poking the holes in your design.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually looking for a blog post that I did. I was pretty angry one day and I did a blog post called What Flipped Learning Is Not. So I'll share that with you in the chat. Just
Oh yeah, great.
yeah, it's an oldie, but a good one. Actually, it got really good, a really good response from the outside, flippers. So it's called What Flip Learning Is Not, a manifesto. So I went all political about stop saying that flip learning when you're not doing half of the work, that it takes to flip the class. So I would invite you to read that. It's actually, as I said, it was well received. So it may have given it may have some points there that you might enjoy.
Well, definitely we'll make sure to include the link in the video description, and then you will see also the link in the in-text of the video. So yeah, it will be there. But yeah, because I think it's important, and especially thinking of the young teachers who are right now in the crowd, and some of the novice teachers who may watch this video, coming for hopefully for some inspiration or a shed of, a little bit of light. In those attempts to flip the class. And I think that you said something that's very important. Read before you start. Don't just jump out there and start flipping. things, because
you're gonna flip out if you do that.
you're gonna flip out, yeah, so to speak. Yeah, and and it's gonna look terrible. And I mean, we talked about that in lesson planning, and with the students, I brought up my famous quote that improvisation is the most advanced form of planning, and I think that applies to flipping a class, to flip learning. Like the amount of preparation, and I would say the amount of pre-preparation that
Actually,
something like this requires.
Yeah, actually, I want to make a reference to the lesson plan that I just shared with you. It was a format. It's kind of a template thing. So it's like, this is kind of a step-by-step of what you should consider when you're going to flip your class, right? So kind of little heads up pieces of information that are going to help you make decisions. So for example, you got to choose the skill or system you want to flip. If you want to do listening, reading, writing, speaking, grammar, vocabulary, or pronunciation, definitely not flip them all at the same time. Not recommendable. Think of the spaces. What would you like to do in each one of the spaces? So for example, what would you like to do in the individual learning space? I have a couple videos about hyperdocs here that are, something that you can watch further after this, just to think whether you would like it, for your own class. Then you're going to describe your space here. How do students work independently in your class? So what are they going to do when they are alone with the content? Then think about the group learning space, what's going to happen synchronously. So video about in-class flip, here is something you can do. You can take, a look at some of the resources that are there on the page. Then think of and design your tasks or activities for each session or unit. So what are you going to do from the individual and the group learning space? And you're going to think of the tech tools that will help you accomplish your goals. Be careful, don't overload your students with too many tech tools. So there's a list here that you can use, and you can add the tools into the different spaces. And then you're going to think about assessments. How will you evaluate students formatively, summatively? Think about that. Plan your lessons. For a video on how I do it, you can go here. Like, I have a lot of resources that I have created over the years, so I try to share them with you just in case you want to go deeper and deeper into this. And then it's kind of the lesson plan format itself. Like first is some considerations, and then like for the lesson. So think of the topic, objectives, class or product, outcome, the type of flip. Are you going to do regular flip? Are you going to do SOFLA? Are you going to do in-class flip? Then what is your entry ticket? What are you going to ask your students to have in their hands before the class starts? Then individual learning space. What are the activities? What are the materials? What is the assessment? Remember, you need to keep students accountable of what they do in their individual learning space. I just realized a little glitch here. It's group learning space, right? So what you're going to do in the group learning space, once again, activities, materials, assessment, and an exit ticket. What are you going to ask your students to show you as proof that they learned? I think if you plan your class with this, you're going to realize like the little things that you have to pay attention to and all the moving parts involved. And so you will think, am I ready or am I not to do this right now, right?
Yeah, amazing. Again, I think it's important to pay attention to those little details. Especially because if you can flip the class, or you can bring the principles of flip learning, because I think it's also important to tell the audience, the young teachers, that there is not just flip learning or traditional classroom, that there is middle ground, and that this is not just, it's not like, okay, that I go with the traditional classroom, I just go a full 180 and I go fully flipping. When no, you can take elements and even the principles. You can even use the principles of flip. Those core principles, and you can infuse those principles in what we could say a traditional, whatever that means, classroom environment. Because I think some of those principles of flip learning, the 4 pillars, it's not just flip learning. I think it's about teaching. Some of those things apply to teaching. Being professional, for example. I think that applies. That's teaching.
Yeah, John Bergman says, one of the pioneers, says that flip learning is just good teaching in disguise. Yeah. Yeah, it's just giving the procedures for good teaching. When you care, when you put students at the center, when you assess, when you observe, when you investigate, yeah, you're a good teacher. you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think it's important to point that out because obviously they want I mean, there's always a question. I imagine you, as one of the experts in our field in the country, you get this question often. It's how do I flip if I don't have if I don't have the technological resources, for example?
Oh yeah.
That's a question I imagine you get a lot. How do I flip if I'm in a rural school? Because I mean, we have these social imaginaries that flipping requires technology. The flipping requires internet and connectivity and platforms and you said there are some elements that there are foundational elements that you can incorporate in a normal classroom to flip it, even if you don't have the technology.
Absolutely. And for example, there are schools with very strong policies about no homework. And so then you wouldn't be able to flip. So it doesn't matter. You in class flip because the whole idea here, and what Raul said is just crucial, is to invert the roles, to invert the spaces, and to know that students don't need to hear us, explaining a topic to get it. Maybe that was so back in the 19th century when there was no access to anything and students didn't have, I mean, there was one book or an encyclopedia in the whole town for everyone to see. So yeah, nobody would learn about anything. But you guys, we live in a different world. We live in a world of access. For example, this kid in the rural area, he doesn't have books, he doesn't have internet, but he has grandparents who have lived. That can be a flipped learning activity in a rural context. Go and interview your grandparents, go and observe something in the setting, bring your experience. And so what happens here is that this is an experiential way of learning. And so the thing about flipping, yes, of course, it became viral because of the technology and it became a thing. The name flip learning became a thing because of the technology that was around, but it has principles of good teaching that Jerome Bruner talked about in 1968 and Benjamin Bloom talked about in 1956 and Lev Vygotsky talked about in 1978. Like this is all constructivism, this is all cognitivism. So we just have to go back to those learning theories and rescue all those things that we need in order for students to be at the center of the learning process. And then we're flipping.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a question right in the chat from Jose Manuel. So it says, hello, Carolina, I have a question. Children are already used to working differently since COVID-19 appeared. They must do so many guides, and that seems boring to them. So how can we apply this to elementary school children? And how can I start to apply it with them?
Okay, thank you so much for your question. Okay, let me see the name. Wait a second. Jose Manuel, thank you very much for your question, Jose Manuel. And yeah, unfortunately, we're gonna have to deal with a lot of resistance. And I did mention that earlier. Resistance is gonna be all around from parents, from students, from the administrators, because things that imply a change of mindset, of course, are gonna generate resistance. But those are the things who actually generate change. So yes, I'm sorry. I know the teachers have had a really difficult time creating all these guides, all these worksheets, all these things, and not being recognized or thanked for them. It's really hard, but we know that one thing we need to know is that we need to go back to neuropsychology and to think about how the brain learns. How do we learn? Do we learn from filling out handouts? No, we learn from experience. We learn from engaging with the content. We learn from involvement. We learn from things that motivate us. And so that's what we do. That's how you do it. And that's how you apply it with children. For example, my kids, I've seen my two children, I am a mom of two, and I've seen my two children do crazy things. Like they've done recipes, for example. That's how the teachers are teaching math. They're doing Play-Doh figures, they're coloring, they're cutting, they're making blocks, they're drawing, they're dancing, they're singing, they're recording, making posters, you name it. Think about how do children learn? If you don't know, go to the literature, check what Piaget said back in I don't know when, check what Montessori said, how do they learn? And then bring all those things into your class. You can make, for example, I have a couple of students back in a master's program, I don't know how many years ago, they flipped their third grade class The children didn't have access to the internet back in the day. So what they did was they recorded a CD with the lessons, you know, and they gave them the CD with the lessons to watch at home. And so the kids will watch the lessons from telling the time, the numbers, the weather, you know, whatever, you name it. And the beautiful thing about that project is that not only the children learned, but also their parents and grandparents and mothers and fathers, because there was only one TV in the house and they just played, you know, the DVD or whatever the disc was. And everyone learned about that topic in the house, you know. So think about that. How do they learn? How do I engage them? How do I get them to be excited about what I'm trying to teach? And there you have the answer on how to do it.
And that, yeah, and I think that's at the core of it. It's how we think about the kind of class we want to have. I don't know if there is any last question from anyone in the crowd. I'll just give everybody 1 minute or two to think about it. Doesn't mean we're already starting to coming into the time to start winding down a little bit the webinar. So I'll just give everybody a minute or two to either turn on the microphone or make any last comment or raise another question in the chat. Yes, no, maybe. Well,
There's definitely Friday.
and there is a lot to digest in this. So, I mean, they still have a lot of things to digest, and then they'll probably have a chance to watch this once it's up when you can see it on YouTube. So I just wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude and appreciation for your time, for the ideas that you brought, for the expertise that you shared with the class. And again, with people the folks who will be watching this video in a few days when it's already online. Thank you for giving us a lot to think about what it means to flip the class and what it means, what it doesn't mean to flip a class, what it is and what it isn't. I think it's important to keep those things to consideration. Everybody, remember, you can definitely, and this will be probably you may have seen it already in the video. You may have seen the Twitter, Karina's Twitter account, her website, her email will be. You may have seen it already in different moments of the video once it's already on YouTube. Contact Carolina. She's very friendly. She's a very approachable scholar, one with great ideas. So once again, thank you so much for sharing this little bit of time with us and giving us some of your wisdom on a topic that continues to be a hot topic, trending. But because it's trending, it's because it's the reason we have to take it seriously, so we do not trivialize it even further.
Actually, that's very thoughtful. Thank you so much for that, because some of us have spent over 7 years learning about this, working with it and really seeing it work and seeing it flourish in our context. So that's why I like the opportunity to share with these future teachers that are full of ideas, full of energy and stamina that we need to change the education scenario in our country.
Absolutely. So for the students in the crowd, thank you so much for your comments, for opening your microphones, raising the questions. As we always do, remind everybody that this video is part of the LSLP in session webinar series on our YouTube channel. And as always, we invite you to check out this webinar, check out this the webinar we have with our Professor Marta Ramirez and all the other webinars we have featuring national and international scholars at the higher education level and public school teachers, elementary school teachers, all talking about great stuff that is happening in the classrooms and in research. So with that, thank you so much, everybody, and everybody have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.
Have a wonderful afternoon and weekend.
Thank you.